Whether it's clippings, leaves, pine cones, or small branches, the YUKA by Mammotion is one of the first cordless mowing robots that doesn't just cut grass like every other robot, it also collects these objects with a sweeping unit and collection basket when needed. In theory, this is undoubtedly a brilliant feature that grabs the attention of many garden owners, myself included. But how well does this sweeping attachment actually work with different materials in practice? Is the extra cost worth it? And what do you need to keep in mind to achieve perfect results? We'll explore these questions in today's video. So, I'd say let's get started right after the intro. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel and activate the bell so you won't miss any videos. You can find the current prices for the device, which also supports my work, as usual, in the video description below. Thank you for your support, and let's dive in. Anyone who has chosen the YUKA by Mammotion has certainly done so for a good reason. In my opinion, and likely for many others, the optional sweeping unit is the #1 selling point. But how well does the attachment actually perform in practice? What applications is it suitable for? And does it make sense for your garden or not? Today's video will provide answers. Let's start with a few brief words about the setup process. It's important to mention upfront to avoid any misunderstandings. The YUKA comes standard without a collection basket. The entire sweeping unit must be purchased separately if needed. Once purchased, it needs to be installed, which takes approximately 15 minutes. I've already created a separate video on this. If you haven't seen it yet, you can find it now in the top right info card or on my channel. In today's video, however, we'll focus exclusively on a detailed, practical test of the sweeping unit. After mounting the unit, we can access additional settings in the app that weren't available before, such as adjusting the interval size for emptying the collection basket and specifying locations where the leaves should be dumped. These 2 points are particularly important because, otherwise, the robot won't even start collecting. Depending on the size of the area and the amount of debris, we should adjust the settings since the collection basket's volume is relatively limited at 22 liters. Overall, we can set up to 100 dumping locations, with the robot always heading to the nearest one to save distance. The setup is done, as usual, via the map management section. Here, a small trash can icon now appears, symbolizing the dumping locations. We guide the robot to the spot outside the zone where the dumping point should be placed, tap the trash can icon, and then drive the robot back into the zone so it knows which path to follow. This process should be repeated as many times as necessary until all dumping locations have been set. After that, the robot with the sweeping unit is ready for use. Let's now see how well it handles various types of debris. To test the sweeping unit as thoroughly as possible, I gathered a variety of materials, including small leaves, large leaves, needles, pine cones, and even acorns. I distributed them across the lawn area step by step, had the YUKA collect them, documented the results in between, and then evaluated them. Let's start with the small leaves. For the first test, I used small leaves, mainly from linden trees, with a maximum diameter of 10 centimeters. The leaves also contain thin branches up to 20 centimeters in length, which could make the collection process more challenging, but are naturally found on lawns as well. I evenly distributed these on the test area and then sent the YUKA on its way. As you can clearly see in the video, this posed no problem at all for the sweeping unit, as confirmed by the results. With a set speed of 0.3 meters per second, the unit managed to collect the leaves almost completely without any issues, which I find very impressive. Notably, I had concerns that it might not collect everything since I had spread the leaves densely on the lawn. However, over the course of the test, the device proved me wrong, as you can clearly see in the video. Another positive observation is that the robot also had no trouble collecting small branches, provided they weren't too large. This means that branches longer than 20 centimeters should be avoided, as they can get stuck in the sweeping unit and, in the worst case, cause damage. If the branches are smaller, the robot collects them effortlessly, as demonstrated. For the second test, I evaluated the sweeping unit with significantly larger leaves, as this has been a frequent request in the past. These leaves, as shown, had a maximum diameter of an impressive 20 centimeters, representing about the largest scenario imaginable. I also tried to distribute these very large leaves evenly before letting the Yuka do its work. The app settings were not adjusted. Compared to the first test, however, the results show certain differences. The large leaves clearly presented a greater challenge for the sweeping unit. While most of the leaves were still collected, not all of them were picked up. Leaves up to 20 centimeters in diameter were so large and dense that the sweeping unit sometimes struggled with them, which could be heard in the abrupt noises it made. The result? Occasionally, some leaves were run over but left behind, only to be collected in the next pass. I also noticed that with these very large leaves, there is a potential issue where some leaves get caught on the robot and are dragged along. This happened both with the Yuka's mowing mechanism and the sweeping unit itself. The leaves are either pushed ahead of the device or get stuck and fall off in areas the Yuka has already cleaned, resulting in the same outcome. In dense areas of large leaves, as shown in the video, the Yuka can still clean the area, but the collection rate is slightly lower than in the previous test. In this case, I would strongly recommend sending the robot out at shorter intervals to clean the area. This is especially important because large leaves are very bulky and quickly fill up the collection basket. The fewer leaves the robot passes over at once, the higher the likelihood it will collect them completely as it doesn't choke on them. The device handles small amounts of large leaves very well, but a flood of large leaves, as seen in the video, should be avoided or handled with multiple passes. In practice, however, it's unfortunately not always the case that the leaves lie loosely on the lawn. Sometimes they may even be embedded in the grass because they haven't been removed for a long time. To test this, I had the Yuka work on an area where this was exactly the case. The space hadn't been cleared for several days, and leaves, small branches and needles had become embedded in the grass. Additionally, as shown, the grass itself was already slightly matted, making the cleaning significantly more difficult. Looking at the Yuka's performance, the results speak for themselves in my opinion. Despite the heavily embedded leaves and needles in the matted grass, the device had no real difficulty cleaning the area in a single pass, which I find very impressive. Thanks to the rubber brush, the grass is lifted, allowing the removal of leaves and needles that are slightly deeper in the grass. This is particularly evident when comparing the already clean tracks to the untouched ones. The grass was effectively combed through, enabling the removal of needles as well, as we observed during the test. Examining the collection basket further emphasizes these results. After just a few passes, the basket was already well filled with needles, leaves, and dead grass. This demonstrates that the sweeping unit performs well even on taller and matted grass. Another challenge for many garden owners is pine cones, which frequently fall onto lawns and complicate the mowing process. In this test, I assessed the sweeping unit's performance on smaller pine cones up to 5 centimeters in length. Due to their size, the pine cones sink quite deep into the grass from the start, as seen, making this a particularly interesting test. Again, no settings were changed, and I sent the robot out for several attempts. The results are as follows. For smaller pine cones scattered across the lawn, the likelihood of them being collected is surprisingly high, which personally impressed me. The sweeping unit cleans the grass deeply enough so that even deeply embedded pine cones are caught by the brush and transported into the collection basket. I observed this result consistently with isolated pine cones. However, if many pine cones are concentrated in one spot, such as after a storm, the sweeping unit is no longer able to collect them all in a single pass. In such cases, it's advisable to keep the grass as short as possible and have the Yuka run regularly to prevent any backlog and ensure good, practical results. Based on this, it's time to take a closer look at the ultimate challenge, acorns. Since most devices have so far failed to remove small acorns from lawns, it will be particularly interesting to see how well Yuka's electric sweeping unit handles them. Compared to pine cones, acorns are smaller and heavier, which means they sink almost to the grass line and are very difficult to remove. The test quickly revealed that the sweeping unit struggled significantly with them as well. In the first attempt, the sweeper managed to collect only a portion of the acorns, while the rest were simply driven over. Admittedly, this was partly because the acorns were very concentrated in one area. When more spread out, the results improved slightly. Nevertheless, in my test with grass at a height of 5 centimeters, some acorns always remained on the lawn, failing to be collected even after a second pass as they were too deeply embedded in the grass. In this case, I would strongly recommend keeping the lawn as short as possible. The denser and shorter the grass, the better objects like pine cones and acorns are collected. On the other hand, some may wonder how the robot handles much larger objects on the lawn, such as apples, pears, or large pine cones. I tested this in practice as well, and the answer became evident quite quickly. Objects like fruit or large pine cones with a diameter of around 5 centimeters pose a significant problem for the robot, as can be observed. The robot's front skirting is so low that these objects tend to get caught and even jam. In such cases, I would strongly recommend removing these items by hand beforehand, as the sweeper attachment will struggle to handle them. Alright, that covers the suitability of the sweeping unit for various materials. As demonstrated, the attachment performs impressively in a variety of scenarios, saving significant time in practice. However, there are a few limitations to keep in mind before deciding to purchase the sweeping attachment. Let's now look at these considerations. When discussing limitations, the first point to mention is terrain handling, which changes due to the increased weight and shifted center of gravity. The heavy weight at the rear of the machine shifts the center of gravity far back, causing the robot to lift its front end more easily on steep inclines. Originally, the robot is designed to handle inclines of up to 45%. However, with the sweeping attachment mounted, this capability is reduced to a maximum of 18%. Beyond that, complications arise. Another consideration is edge trimming, which requires attention. Sloping edges are not an issue. What I'm referring to are protruding edges or walls. Due to the long rear end of the sweeping unit, the robot may scrape the attachment against the boundary when veering during operation. The exact clearance needed to prevent this would require further testing. If there's interest or if someone already has experience with this, feel free to share in the comments below. The noise level of the sweeping unit is another factor not to be underestimated. Many garden owners prefer a nearly silent mowing robot, such as the YUKA itself. However, attaching and using the sweeping unit significantly increases noise compared to the base robot. To illustrate this better, I measured the noise level during operation. At a distance of 1 meter, I recorded up to 70 decibels, which is comparable to a lively conversation. This means I would advise against using the sweeping unit at night or on Sundays and public holidays. So, who should invest in the sweeping unit and who shouldn't? Overall, I have to say that I'm genuinely impressed by the YUKA sweeping unit. Not only is the concept brilliant and unique, but the functionality, as demonstrated in the detailed practical tests, is also excellent. The device performs flawlessly when it comes to collecting small and large leaves, as well as branches. It can also pick up pine cones and acorns to a certain extent. The only task left to us is collecting small heaps of debris, which saves valuable time in practice. The best results are achieved on short and dense grass, where the sweeping unit efficiently collects acorns. The longer the grass, the more challenging it becomes for the sweeping unit, leading to less satisfactory results. In conclusion, it can be said, if your garden has many large deciduous or coniferous trees that regularly shed leaves, or if you prefer not to leave the robot's clippings behind and don't have steep inclines, I can highly recommend the YUKA sweeping unit. It's definitely worth the investment. Now it's your turn. What's your opinion on the sweeping unit? Or perhaps you already have hands-on experience with it. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. I'm looking forward to your feedback. If you enjoyed this video, please show your support with a big thumbs up and consider subscribing to help this video gain traction. You'll find the latest prices for the device to support my work in the video description below. Thank you so much for your support. Stay healthy, take care, and see you next time. Goodbye!